So the sideways shuttles, these will help to improve the explosive power in George's legs. We'll have two cones and there will be 5 meters placed from one another. The client will do a fast squat-like sidestep from cone to cone, keeping his body positioned forwards. So this will really help to improve the explosive power in George's legs as he goes side to side really quickly. So for this exercise, I'll only need the 2 cones. The key coaching point is to keep the body position as low as possible while sustaining the squat-like position. I'll demonstrate and verbally explain the exercise to George, as this is a bit harder to understand. If George is finding this too easy or too hard, then we will change the distance of the cones. And if he really wants to make it easier, then we'll just do normal side step. I'll watch George as he takes part in this exercise. I will then correct him as he takes part. So moving on to reverse lunges. So this will help to strengthen and build up the explosive power in George's thigh and quadricep. So these are basically when you do a squat. Instead of going forwards to squat, you place your leg backwards, and then as you can see in the picture, so our leg goes back, and then we drive our leg up, and this being the final position. So I'll have to demonstrate this as this is harder to explain. The key coaching points are to hold your knee up for 2 seconds, which I will count for George. This will help the contraction and will really burn. It will build up lactic acid, but it will really pay off in the long run, as these really do help to build up the power in your quadriceps. So another coaching point is to keep the foot flat on the floor and keep it balanced. I'll instruct George on the corrections while we take part in the exercise. To make this easier, we will do normal lunges, but walking. To make it harder, we will use weights in our hands, driving the weight up. The repetitions we'll be going for will be for 30 seconds, and then we'll switch legs and we'll do this 4 times, so twice on each leg. Okay, so moving on. So this is our second page of main content. So firstly, we're going to look at the squat box jump. So these again will help to build up the explosive power in George's legs. It involves doing a squat-like position with the box in between your legs and then jumping onto the box. So this picture is a bit inaccurate, but is the only one I can find. So really, the box needs to be in between our legs. So we'll be holding the squat position, then jumping on top of the box here, still holding the squat position, and then jumping back off. So for this, I'll only need a box. It won't take long to set up. The exercise is good as it does burn a lot of fat in the quadriceps. The key coaching points are to keep good form when squatting, so keep your back straight. We don't really want to be going out of this position. We want to keep our knees in as well. So if George's form is not good, then I'll stop him and correcting, as he could get injured doing this squat, as it jumping on and off, you could twist an ankle or something. So I will have to stop him and correct him. To make this harder, we can introduce light weights in your hand. Heavy weights would be too hard jumping up and down, and it would just do your back no good. And to make it easier, we will take some of the blocks out of the box and make it much lower. So again, this will help George just burst out from the block on the sprint, which will really just help him get an edge over his opponent. So we'll do 5 reps on, and then we'll have a little rest, and then we'll do another 5 reps, and we'll repeat this 6 times. So we are doing less reps, but 6 sets, so it will build up the power a lot. Okay, so the 10-meter sprint from press up. So this will really help George to burst up into a sprint. It also helps George's core strength, which is obviously always important when lifting any weights or doing any movement. So for this activity, I don't need any equipment other than a couple of cones, but if I don't have the space for the cones, then this is not a worry, as we can go on without them. It won't take much time to set up, maybe 20 seconds at most, and I will explain using demonstration and verbal explanation. So the key coaching points are to hold the position correctly, and burst up into a sprint. So we're holding the press up position, as you can see in the picture, for 5 seconds. Then we'll jump up from that position straight into a sprint for 20 meters, for 10 meters I mean. So if we want to make this a bit harder, then we can make George do 5 press ups, and once he's done the 5 press ups, straight into the sprint. And if we want to make it easier, then we can introduce the knees, so he's not really struggling with his core strength. If George's correct technique is not good, then I can obviously correct him while he's doing this. He will be allowed a rest in between if it's needed, which I'll ask him in between. So the repetitions, we'll do 5 repetitions, have a little break, and then we'll do another 5. If he needs a rest in between the 5 repetitions, then that will be okay, but no longer than really 20 seconds. Then you won't get much, the real improvement you want from this exercise. So zigzag sprints. So this will consist of sprinting in a zigzag-like direction, as you can see here. So from one cone all the way to the others. This will also help flexibility, which is always good to improve on. As George is a rugby player, so flexibility is always key in rugby for changing directions. So for this activity I will need 5 cones. It will take no longer than 50 seconds to prepare. And the key coaching points are to lower body position when turning and blasting off from the cones using explosive power in our quadriceps, which we've just been working on in the squats and the other exercises such as leaps and sideways shuttles. Okay, so I'll demonstrate this to George, as it can sometimes get a bit confusing when there is a cone set out in front of you and you don't really know where you're going. To make this harder, we can introduce a bigger distance between the cones. We can make them wider and also longer. So we can make this cone from this distance, we can make it up here, so you're going like that distance. Or we could do it all the way to here and then introduce it a bit further, so we're wider, and then keep going on to the next one, and the cones will be wider away from each other. To make it easier, obviously we can bring the cones in and we can lower the intensity, so we won't be sprinting at a 20 on the ball scale. We'll be going at about a 17, which will make it a lot easier. Then moving on to our final activity, zigzag sprint using the rugby ball. So as George was sprinting, it'll be exactly the same as the last one. He'll be sprinting from cone to cone. As he gets to each cone on this side, I'll be stood around here, so I'm not in the way at all, and I'll have a rugby ball in my hand, passing it from here to the cone, and George will have to catch the ball, throw it back to me, and then sprint on to the next one. So this just in places some other aspects of rugby, which will really help George then. So when he's sprinting, he's also able to catch a rugby ball and play rugby. So this will be, we'll do about 5 reps of these 2 activities. So 5 from the first one and 5 from the other, so 10 overall. So that is a lot of sprinting. So if George is starting to struggle at the end, we can bring the intensity down, obviously, and we can make it narrower. If he's still got loads of energy, we can make it bigger, and we can introduce more passes in the rugby ball, so getting past the ball at each station. However, getting past it at each station does give you a bit of more rest time, so we have to make sure George is putting in 100% effort in the sprint. Okay, so moving on to our cool down. So this section of the session is really just to prevent George from picking up any injuries. It's also to bring the heart rate down and breathing rate down, back down to resting. This will help to return George to a resting state. It will also mentally calm George down, as he's done a lot of hard work and the session, so we will need to mentally cool down as well, so he's not just really hyper for the rest of the day. So we will also have a nice chat to reflect on the session, ask George if he feels the session went well. I'll show you my client review sheet in a second. And if George has any questions, he can ask me this now. So as you can see here, for a warm down. We'll start with a slow jog, then a slow walk. We'll then move on to some stretches for our lower and upper quadriceps. So we may need to lean against the wall or a partner, but I can be George's partner in this situation. However, if there is a group of more than one person, then they may need to use each other, or we'll put them into pairs. We will then do some stretches for our upper body again. We may need partners for these stretches and stretching out the pectoral muscles. We will need to lean against the wall, stretching out our hamstrings and our quadriceps, obviously the main aspect, as they are the biggest used section of the body and the muscles in this session. So as I said, at the end of the session I will complete a session review with George. This will help me find out whether my session has helped George or whether it was too hard or too easy. Once this is complete, I will pack up all my equipment so there's nothing left out, and I'll put my equipment back where I got it from. Okay, so moving on to client aims. So obviously my client aim was to improve sprint speed. We'll find this out during the 50, 30, 50 and 100 meter sprint tests. We'll test for power using the jump height test, which we'll do before the session, and we will have completed after to see if George's power has increased. Here you can see the peer review evaluation form, which our peer will be watching our session and making sure they're marking off these. So here is my client evaluation form. These are the questions I asked my client after the session. So, one of my strengths was my motivation. I helped to motivate my client to help them mentally and physically complete the tasks. So if they were struggling a bit, then I would give them lots of encouragement so they'd pick up and put 100% effort in. Another of my strengths was how I corrected my client whilst they were doing their practices. This helped my client get the most from their session, as their technique was correct, which will help them to work the specific muscle group. An area I really need to improve on is my facial expression. According to my peer observing in my session, I came across a bit like stern and unhappy. So I do need to smile more, but obviously I was not stern or unhappy, but my facial expression said differently. If I was a bit happy, this may improve the mood of the session. However, I did have a laugh with George a couple of times, so I do need to work on this. The second improvement is one of my drills did not work. So to improve this, I must make sure that I've tried out all my practices before the session starts in future. Again, the client aims, so speed training to improve sprint speed. We'll be doing power plyometric training and interval training. So we'll use the jump height test and 30 meter sprint to test whether our client has improved, and there'll be a 50 meter sprint test at the start and at the end of the program, along with the 100 meter sprint and the 30 meter sprint. So strengths for my program writing. So I did really try and vary my activities. So I had some plyometric activities in my session, and I also had some interval training. So I didn't do lots of the same activities. I tried to vary them using the plyometric and interval training. So I alternated between these sometimes, and this made sure my client did not get bored. Different practices and alternatives for every activity. I had different practices and different alternatives ready, so I had enough practices that I would not run out of practices before the end of the session. However, before the session I definitely need to make sure the practices work, so I should have practiced these before on someone who is not a client, but I did not do this, and one of them didn't work very well. I should have also printed off some pictures of someone performing a squat to show George so he can get the best technique possible. And because sometimes me explaining them doesn't come across as well as just looking at a picture and being able to copy the picture. This would have really helped to improve George's technique. Thank you for listening.